Welcome to the Blooming League of Original Podcasts.
G'day and welcome to another extra special edition of Thrash and Treasure, the torture chamber musical comedy podcast that loves to assess polar opposite genres of music. And speaking of asses, I'm Aaron, and I'm joined as usual by the main man of metal, my co-host with the yummy toast.
Oh,
it's the captain of Team Metal, Evan.
Oh, that's got to be one of your worst puns. That is up there.
I've done co-host with the mo-host, co-host on a different co-host, and a co-host from a different show-host. And I thought you're a baker, so now I've done with the yummy toast. So look out.
They're all equally terrible.
Thank you. That's legitimately the nicest thing you have ever said to me.
How's yourself?
Tired and still in lockdown. What have you been up to?
I have been deep diving into the world of deep button diamond pleating.
Deep button diamond pleating. Now I know what pleating is in a skirt, like a netball skirt.
It's you know that really nice diamond pattern you get on fancy leather chairs, usually expensive furniture. They have this diamond pleating pattern that they do, and I've had to learn how to do it.
Are they diamonds or are they plastic?
No, the metal buttons that I have to cover. It's upholstery.
Okay, but anyways, guess what?
What?
We have another Hollywood diva in the studio today. A guest we've been waiting 65 million years for. Today's extra amazing guest has been described as sitcom Viagra, with stimulatingly funny shows such as Sports Night, Roseanne, Grease Under Fire, Schooled, as well as many, many more notches under his resume belt. And much like us all, spent one time in his youth wrapping his fingers around Herman's head, plus his autobiographical take on the genre with his self-narrated series, The Kids Are All Right. Oh, yay, I love The Who. Wait, no, that was about his childhood. And speaking of which, he was also a writer and producer and one-time voice actor on one of my all-time favorite shows, Dinosaurs. But today he's here to pick the bones off some heavy metal. It is my absolute honor to welcome to the show the man who penned some disturbing behavior in 87's Zombie High, before making his acting debut in the long-forgotten blockbuster gay drama, The Natural History of Parking Lots, as the all-important character named Teacher, and yet he is an artist so incredibly talented that his resume could create, then destroy the Earth. From The Big Bang Theory came Dinosaurs, thereafter The Straight White Man, which led to The Last Man Standing, and that was Andy Richter, who controls the universe. So before we go extinct, let's chuck a huge g'day across the Pacific Ocean to Mr. Tim Doyle. Goodness gracious me. How are you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm flabbergasted and feeling very old now that you've laid out my resume like that. I'm quite an accomplished television writer.
You are. That was a small chunk.
Yeah, just a small sample.
Yeah, I would ask you, do you ever find time to sit down? But you're a writer. That's all you ever do. So do you ever find time to stand up and walk around?
Yes.
You do. Okay.
Yes, I try to make the time now, especially since the quarantine.
So I was just about to ask about that because obviously both our countries are up shit creek at the moment without much of a paddle. In television, for those at home, in sitcoms, there's an expression called a bottle episode, which is a money-saving technique. Really, it'll be an episode taking place in one location with just the main cast. But would you say that 2020, 2021 has been the bottle episode of years for us?
I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah. We've been, and I think just like most bottle episodes, people will be, people were disappointed by the experience. Yeah, it's not as much fun as you want it to be.
No, I think the last good one I could remember was probably Friends from 20-something years ago when Ross is running late.
Yeah, it's a contrivance on sitcoms that if you've got really good characters and there's some fun conflict that can be played just between them. But I don't know, especially these days, sitcoms are so much more paced and to have so much more plot and so much more going on, and they're more cinematic. I mean, in the old days with the multicam sitcoms, it was, they were more like a little stage play anyway. But with most of what is on TV now, which has the feel more of like an independent movie, I think, locking two people in a room and having them talk for 20 minutes, isn't that exciting.
Yeah, reminds me that's the Seinfeld episode where the entire episode takes place waiting for a table.
Yeah, at the Chinese restaurant, right?
Yeah. That's classic though, as well.
Yeah, it's kind of, well, believe me, it's been well done, and I've been involved in some episodes that I thought were pretty good. But it's a constraint, like all the constraints when you're putting on a show. You can use it to its advantage. You can find the pluses in it. But I would hate to do one every week. I would hate to have to do a show, that was stuck in in one spot every week.
Yeah, there was so many like that.
But that being said, you look at an old show like like All in the Family or something like that, and 99% of that show took place in the living room with the flat shot of him sitting in the chair, and maybe they moved over to the dinner table, but once in a while they went out to the kitchen. But very rarely they went up to their bedrooms or to somebody's workplace or anything. That show, was a little kitchen sink show that took place, in a very confined space, and worked beautifully because the characters were so well sketched.
Yeah. So when the studio or the network comes to you and says, we need a bottle episode, how much do you cringe up inside?
It's one of those things where you always, when you're doing art of any kind, you're always working up against limitations, whether it's budget limitations or an actor that is good at one thing but isn't good at something else, or, and all the time you get notes on a project and they say, oh, this is too expensive. You can't do this scene that takes place at the ocean. You can't do this scene that takes place in the car while they're driving. We can't afford that. And you suddenly have to turn it into a scene that takes place with two people sitting in a room talking, and it's not always ideal, because there's more energy and more, part of entertainment is spectacle, is showing people something interesting to look at. So you kind of shortchanging the audience a little bit.
Yeah.
When you limit the visual element of a show.
Just to save the producers some money.
Which has always been my least, a very low priority for me in the work I do.
Yes, I can tell.
Yeah, and it always feels like a compromise.
In what ways do they differ when you're developing that sort of story? Is it a relief to get something that you don't need to, think of other locations, or does it pose more of a challenge?
I find that, I don't like to be restricted in that way. It's the kind of thing people that studios or networks, but studios will mostly press you to do for economy. And, I would rather compromise with them on other things rather than just say, the characters are stuck in an elevator. And we have to do 30 minutes like that, unless it's really a creative turn on it. I think when people started doing those, there were clever episodes where, we're going to be in an elevator for most of the episode or all of the episode, or people are going to be locked in the basement or something like that. There was a memorable one on All in the Family that was like that, and those things had all been done. So I would much rather have the opportunity to give the viewer a more kinetic experience, a bigger experience, than just have two people in a room talking.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've come to the right place for people talking.
Well, it's much more of a phenomenon of like multi-camera shows than it would be like on a single camera show. But again, when but you're approached all the time, and they say you've used up your budget for for location shooting, or you've got to cut back on the number of sets, or you can have fewer actors or whatever. There's always these sort of compromises made, but I don't like making them. I don't like have my arm twisted to do it, but I'm a kind of a grouch that way when it comes to money stuff. One of the things that pisses me off so much about TV is, and this applies to shows that I've worked on and just shows that I watch. It's like you'll see the pilot, and they clearly spent $10 million on this pilot. It looks fantastic. It looks like a big budget film. And then episode 2, they have $4 million to spend on episode 2, or $2 million to spend on episode 2. And suddenly all that scope and the stunts and the spectacle and the cast of thousands and stuff that you that you had in the pilot, that's all gone, and you've got two people in a room talking.
Mhm.
And and I think that a lot of the time that's a bait and switch on the audience that the audience doesn't appreciate.
Yeah.
But I would, if as an experiment, look at almost any show, from a pilot to its first and second, third episode, and you see an immediate scaling down where they go from the lavish budget of the pilot to the much more managed budget, pattern budget that they have when they're doing the episodes. Not as much like on HBO or Netflix now, but this is definitely a phenomenon of network television.
Yeah. No, I think that's why I appreciated Lost so much, because whilst it did have some smaller episodes, the grandeur was there all the way through. The ensemble cast was there all the way through.
Yeah, but it was largely a cast of unknowns. I mean, the people on that show, there were no fat salaries on that show. They weren't. No. It wasn't Lost, starring Courtney Cox, or whatever. So they probably got all those people pretty cheap.
Yeah.
And so, having 10 or 12 principals, in a show, in a series like that, isn't that bad, as long as the people aren't expensive.
Yeah, that's true. I guess Michael Keaton quit when he found out that Jack was going to stay alive, because he signed up for the pilot when they were going to kill Jack off.
No, that's funny.
Yeah, when they decided to keep him because he was, the leading Lothario character, he quit, and Matthew Fox got the part. So
right.
So one much cheaper. Yeah.
Really good, because the show probably wouldn't have gone as long. They couldn't afford that guy.
No.
I certainly find I have more watching loyalty to a show that starts with complete unknowns, and you've got characters that you can fall in love with, follow their journey as they go on.
Yeah, and you don't have a lot of history with them. This guy didn't play Fonzie on Happy Days.
Yeah, you're not constantly going, that's just Ross from Friends. I'm sorry, it's Ross.
No, that's absolutely true. But of course, why do we have stars in movies or in TV? You have stars because it gives you that opening weekend. It gives you that first blush of interest in the project.
Yeah.
And network TV, television in general is becoming more like the movies in that respect. That there's so many options out there for what to watch. Your favorite show, and this doesn't just apply because you're in Australia, but I always think about this with people I know here in LA. Your favorite show is probably a show I've never heard of, or maybe I've heard of it, but I've never seen it. Everyone's television has become so so personal. It isn't the communal experience it once was, when a show like Seinfeld was on, and it was on Thursday nights here, and every Friday we'd go back to work and everybody would be talking about what happened on Seinfeld last night.
Yeah, the water cooler show. Yeah,
we don't have that anymore. We don't have water coolers either, I guess. But the communal experience is lost. So there's tons of shows out there. Even my wife watches shows that I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
She has her TV upstairs and I have mine downstairs.
You can equate it to musical tastes, where people go, "Oh, I'm into this little band in Britain that no one's ever heard of." Yeah. I could be watching some show from Scandinavia that no one's ever heard of, and it's the coolest show ever. I'm in the loop because, I find shows that people haven't heard of.
Yeah. Congratulations. You just threw in your first segue question, Evan. You're growing up in the podcast world.
Really?
We'll move on to metal, because otherwise we could talk about television forever.
We could.
Sure.
Now, obviously, you said that you know less about metal, but I do know that you have worked with quite a few times one of the most iconic punks, the punk on bus, Kirk Thatcher, on both Dinosaurs and The Kids Are Alright.
And he wrote that song, the Punk on the Bus song. He wrote it and sang it in that Star Trek movie.
He did too.
It's fun as a writer when you write a little piece of music and you get a tiny fee for it. It does. I've done it. I wrote a couple of songs on the Dinosaurs show. Just like the lyrics for some silly song that they sang, a jingle or a commercial or whatever. I don't think I'm still getting any money for those, but I think initially, during the initial airings, you would get $100 here and $100 there.
Nice.
Yeah. Which music genre on bus would you be if you were the character in Star Trek instead?
Well, right now at this point in my life, I would be the guy listening too loudly to his podcast probably.
Yep.
As much as I enjoy music and love music, I almost exclusively listen to podcasts when I'm going for a walk or riding in my car. But yes, the characteristic musics of my life have been either like show tunes from the Broadway musicals, or just the very stereotypical stuff from people of my age who grew up in the 70s. And I leaned more toward the kind of California sound of the Eagles and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and that kind of stuff. You know, James Taylor and whatever, Carly Simon and that. But I also listened to. I loved Jethro Tull. And I know Ian Anderson is touring again. I may try to see him at some point before he or I die. But I loved Tull, and and obviously like the Beatles and the sort of the bands that were played at the school dances and stuff when I was a kid.
Oh God, school dances! Don't remind me. We'll move on to metal, obviously. And Evan, you chose the album this week. And would you like to tell our listeners what you chose for us?
Yeah, well, we got System of a Down, their 2005 album, Mesmerize, which is their fourth album, 4 years after Chop Suey.
Wake up, wake up, wake up.
Everybody knows
I know that song.
So it's a follow-up from the 2002 Steal This album. Mesmerize was funny because it came out in two parts. There's Mesmerize and Hypnotize, and they were released 6 months apart, but they're technically a double album. They match together, but both albums, funnily enough, both debuted #1 on the Billboard album charts, which is makes them one of the few bands to have ever had two albums debut and #1 in the same year.
What about the Beatles?
Pretty cool.
Surely the Beatles did that.
This is one of the few. I could probably find more instances.
Yeah.
I'm sure this was, but there's not many bands have done that.
Yeah.
So that
once you started talking, I did switch off a little bit.
Oh, my God.
I'm kidding. Go on, continue. I'm just trying to see if I can find the review.
Yeah, no, I remember this album. We thrashed the hell out of this in 2005, which is it's not that long ago. God, although it does feel like it. Yeah, so of course BYOB is a classic. Bring Your Own Bombs, that got a Grammy.
Oh, is that what that means?
Bring Your Own Bombs, yeah. So he's very political. I hope I can pronounce his name.
Oh, here we go. All right, do we want to hear it?
Want to hear yours? Oh, okay. Halfway through mine, you're just going to go, put the brakes on.
Yeah, sorry. No, okay, you finish.
My favourite, the standout song obviously is BYOB, which got them a Grammy. Serge Tankian, I hope I pronounced that right. He is just an exceptional vocalist. He's up there with one of the best vocalists in the world for having just such a unique voice, and for the way he uses it, blending his Middle Eastern influences into American metal in such creative ways. There's so much sprinkled throughout their career. Well, in nearly every song, really, will bust out a bit of,
Aren't they Armenian?
Yes, they're Armenian. And in my minimal amount of research that I did, I didn't realize they are from Glendale, California, which is where I lived most of my life. A small suburban town outside of Los Angeles, Glendale.
Well, there you go.
And Glendale is a huge Armenian community. I mean, there's like more Armenians in Glendale than there are, left in Armenia at this point. I mean, it is a massive Armenian settlement. And so at some point in the 2000s, I'm sure I must have, stood behind them in line somewhere in Glendale or sat next to them in a restaurant or a movie.
You can imagine. Probably. You would have seen like at least billboards or something, posters up and...
Yeah. But yeah, he grew up, like I said, grew up in California. And they all met, in college, basically. So that's all littered through the album of just this brilliant understanding of American college humor. I get that a lot in this album. It just...
Okay.
Yeah, there's jokes, there's musical jokes all the way through it, really. And it's coming from a Middle Eastern influence, whether it's the parents, what they listen to at home, not really sure. I didn't do research on the parents. But then mixed with this real great understanding of American humor.
Yeah.
I love this album. It's fantastic. Even though it's missing, one of their bigger hits. But yeah, I'm quite happy to chuck this on repeat. Love it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay.
Can I rate my own album?
No. But okay, I'll quickly run through this review and then we'll get into Tim's thoughts as well, because I know he did listen to the album for that. I hope it wasn't too awful. I didn't choose it, so I take no blame at all. My hands are clean. Alrighty. When I first thought we were covering System of a Down again, that's exactly where my mood went. Down. But anyway, despite this, I pressed play on the 8-track and found there were indeed 11. The first, Soldier Side, I didn't mind that because I don't mind a bit of Soldier on the side. The second track was definitely the most mainstream. Despite its vulgar acronym, Bring Your Own Bitch, I did. Hey, Evan. Anyways, Revenger had lyrics like blah, 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 which in Lawnmower means Revengers Assemble. But the next track was close but no cigarro to being palatable. Even radio/video, which equated to volume/mute, until the song title, This Cocaine Makes Me Feel Like I'm on This Song, which is clearly an on-the-nose reference to their erratic ADHD brand of metal. And whilst at first I snorted at the wordplay, the unambiguity is the last straw. As for the track and title, Violent Pornography, meh, snuff this song. Question. Whilst yet another song that sounds like Richard Nixon gargling vinegar, it confuses and scares me as much as the mental image of Nixon gargling vinegar. Why so enthusiastic? And why is so an exclamation mark? No wonder the statue is sad. Well, that and politics, since this is the first time politics stood out to me lyrically, and it made me sad too. But is the statue sad or just stoned? I don't know why. Judging by this album, she had a granite. As for the final two songs, shut up. As for the final two songs, both about Hollywood, I can't help but wonder why metal bands have such an issue with song order. Hollywood should be the bookends, with the art in the center. But I do wonder if they wanted to say something a little more offensive given this second attempt at a play on words. And speaking of, this album can be best described by the band's own lyrics. However, as I just spent the third week of lockdown after a week of freedom, this type of hyperactivity is not what the doctor prescribed. 2.5 stars. So that was some really good puns in there. I don't know why you groaned.
Yeah, okay. All right. We'll call them good.
Yes, okay. So what did you think, Tim?
Well, I would think, though, that you would enjoy some of the wordplay in their music. Being such a fan of twisting around words yourself. I thought it was, it's hard to say enjoyable. It's not my cup of tea. The sort of the relentless sort of high pitch of everything, the thump of it all, and not a lot of variety to me. Not enough of a roller coaster ride. Yeah. But again, I on a lyrics level, I thought there was a lot of wit there, and I enjoyed that. This cocaine makes me feel like I'm on this song. I thought was very clever. Bring your own bombs. I thought that was fun. I mean, there's a level of comic poetry here, and my suspicion is that these guys, as much as their music feels kind of oppressive, that they don't take themselves that seriously. They seem to be kind of having fun with what they're doing. Am I wrong? Have you heard them in interviews? Are they insanely pretentious?
Yeah, no, that's spot on as far as I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. They're having fun. As far as like heavy metal goes, it's just it doesn't have all the posturing and stuff that I generally associate with heavy metal, and the there's some nihilism in there. There's a lot of negativity, but that's a reasonable reaction to the world we're living in. And I'd like to analyze their two Hollywood songs a little more deeply in my leisure and see if they have anything that really speaks to me as a denizen of that particular town. Yeah. But I would give it a moderate thumbs up. I'm not saying I'll ever listen to it again, but I was intrigued. And they're touring. So who knows? Maybe I think they're on a double bill with Korn. Now, in that instance, who's the headliner? Who would be the headliner between them and Korn?
Probably Korn, I think. Yeah. Do you reckon Evan would be the headliner?
Oh, Korn has just moved down.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a tie, isn't it?
I'm saying if the horn's the headliner, then it might be an early evening for me.
Yeah.
I'll go say hi to my Armenian homies and then bug out.
Yeah.
I'm going to flip a coin and say Korn is headlining.
Yeah.
They're the more well-known band probably, but my thumb is never on that pulse.
No.
Yeah, although System of a Down haven't played together in at least 10 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they've all been off being busy and creating all their own things, but as a band, no. They released 2 new songs at the end of last year, and that's the first since 2005.
What did you think of their new songs? Do you like their new stuff, or are you
I have not had a chance.
Oh, there you go. Doggy.
Okay, look, as I said, I've been in lockdown. This is the 3rd week that we're in lockdown, and I am a little bit antsy at the moment. This is our 6th lockdown that started only a week or 2 after our 5th lockdown finished, which was a 2-week lockdown. And like before that, we hadn't had one in quite a few weeks. So I am a little antsy to just, I'm faxed. I want this all to be over with, but the fucking assholes out in this world who just keep spreading it won't let it happen. So maybe
now they've turned the Palais Theatre into a pop-up testing site.
Yeah, and last night I should have seen Tommy. Goodness gracious me. No, but what I'm saying is maybe if I had that freedom that my body and soul knew I could go out, I could do things at my leisure, maybe I would have welcomed this music a little bit more. But like whilst it was very much an aural, A-U-R-A-L, representation of my feelings inside, it's still I don't know, I couldn't do it. Not this.
I don't know. One of the virtues of the pandemic is it's a time to open yourself up to experiences that you normally wouldn't tolerate.
Yeah, tell me about it.
And I think that there's some value in that.
Yeah, well, we're hoping so, I tell you that. We just have to get advertisers to give us some value. Yeah, no, I just like, I know their representation. I know their reputation because back 20 years ago when I was a punk, Chop Suey was first released. It was everywhere. All the metalheads would play it at any party. So like I've always known who they were, but I couldn't pick out any of their other songs because that was just the one song that was played to death, really. So maybe that turned me off.
Are you accusing System of a Down of being a one-hit wonder?
No, I'm accusing that song of being done to death.
Yeah, they did kill it, unfortunately. But I'm sorry, I still turn it up.
The fans killed it. The fans killed it, not the band.
If it comes on the radio, I will crank it.
Good for you.
Has Chop Suey been used conspicuously in any films? It seems like it might be a good number for an action sequence. A big fight scene or something.
Most of the Mesmerize album, you can throw in a car chase. You can use it for all sorts of random stuff.
I mean, that's one of the virtues of this kind of music is I don't want to sort of sit and have a mellow evening listening to it. But it would energize an extremely dull, badly shot car chase in a film and television show. You suddenly feel a lot more like there was a lot more going on.
Yeah, they use a lot of heavy metal or new metal in horror a lot of the times.
I don't know. I'm over the take a happy song, slow it down, play it creepy, getting done a little bit too many times and. No, it's starting to turn me off. It has to be done really well now to get away with it.
I don't watch many trailers anymore because I'm sick of connecting the dots before I see a film.
Oh, yeah. Horror movies have been ruining good songs for many years.
Yeah, true.
But there's, what's his name? The director, he just did the Suicide Squad and the,
James Gunn.
Yeah, James Gunn. I mean, he uses needle drops, all through his things, and very effectively in the Galaxy ones, those whatever the Saviors of the Galaxy, whatever those things are called.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, very effectively, songs.
Oh yeah.
And it's become kind of a cliche, or in those Ryan Reynolds superhero movies with I can't come up with the name of anything anymore.
Deadpool.
Yeah, in the Deadpool, there's always that funny contrast of playing some kitschy song from the 70s while he's chopping people's heads off and that kind of stuff.
It reminds me of Shaun of the Dead when they've got the zombie in the bar and they're running around with "Don't Stop Me Now" and they've got the pool cues. But anyways, on that note, since we're talking about visuals and music together, we'll chuck to a quick ad break and we'll be back in a moment with Tim Doyle.
Coming this summer, winter, spring, or fall, the first ever musical theater sitcom, where you go behind the scenes of the latest West End show, the Fosse Forest Ballet.
Where's the important stuff? Aha! £1,000 a week ensemble rate. That's what Mamma Mia likes.
Starring Philip Joel and a West End cast featuring Carrie Ellis, Darren Day, Louise Demon, and Oliver Saville, and more.
It all started in 1987 when I was a jobbing actress working in a diner.
Yeah, it's just I had a really bad experience when I was touring Australia with a wombat.
Darling! Mwah, mwah.
La, la.
How long have I been mentoring you? 3 months?
2 years.
So her name is Henrietta.
The horse. Yes. I've managed to secure you an audition for the biggest, most innovative, and the latest show to be going into the West End. Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat. Think more along the lines of Panther.
Frozen.
You can watch this episode for the price of a coffee. Simply go to www.thefosseforestballet.com. Any and all profits go back to theatre charities, acting for others, and the theatre's trust. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you'll see a grown man in sparkly tights.
Tight nights. Nice. Tights.
And we're back listening to Thrash and Treasure. I'm Aaron, that's Evan, and we're joined by Hollywood legend Tim Doyle. Holy guacamole, what on earth are you doing on my show? For our listeners, you would know that I love a good pun, and I was watching Dinosaurs, which is on Disney Plus, and there was the pun Pangea Hills Dino 210, and I was eating dinner at the time, and I've thrown my knife and fork down, and I've praised the heavens. I laughed my head off. I was cackling like a witch. I just thought this is the greatest pun so far on this show, at least, but one of the greatest pun I've ever seen. And so I put out the open invite to whoever wrote this episode, and lo and behold, you actually said yes. It is an honor to have you on. It really is. That show, I cannot begin.
You got found through a pun. That's quite incredible.
How funny is it?
Yeah, well, the thing on the Dinosaur show was, it was 7 or 8 people sitting around in a room all day, and we would want to tell these stories. We would have stories that we wanted to tell, but you always had to try to find some way to make it about a lizard, to make it about a dinosaur, to make it about prehistoric times, to make it about cavemen, to make it about, so yes, it would be, you'd have a joke, but you had to make sure that it was sort of relevant to the universe of the dinosaurs. So we would almost invariably start with the pun and then figure out what the show was, what the joke was going to be, or what the little story part was going to be, because it just, in order to fit on the show, it had to fall into those constraints. So I'm sure Dino 210 was just something somebody said, and we all giggled, and we said, okay, now we have to figure out what the show is. So we had a pregnant teen with an egg, and a lot of sappiness, which was, our commentary on that particular show. But we did that, we did the ton of that. If you couldn't make it dinosaur relevant, then it was kind of like a force to put something on the show that just didn't belong. You always had to find a twist on it that made it appropriate to that world.
Yeah. Because I know the follow-up after that was Triceratops.
Triceratops, yeah.
Holy shit, Tim, what are you doing to me?
That was a lot of fun. And that was our big Marxist episode. I mean, that was where, where
network.
Earl takes over the network and makes some brainy, and inadvertently comes up with a lot of very brainy shows that make people so smart that they stop watching television. Part of the heavy-handed social satire of the Dinosaurs program, and the nonstop biting of the hand that fed us.
Yes. But look at, and I think that's one thing that Look, John Oliver does it, obviously. The Simpsons have always done it. But I think that satire is dying a little bit, especially in TV comedy.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe people are taking themselves too seriously and networks are taking themselves a little bit too seriously, but I don't work in television, so I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, you're not wrong. I mean, I think it's another one of the victims of media consolidation. I mean, when I started in TV, there were a lot of production entities out there, lots of little independent producers. I mean, I worked, for years for Carsey Werner, which did the Roseanne show and Grace Under Fire and Third Rock from the Sun and all those shows. Yeah. And, and slowly those things have kind of gone away. And now basically, you work for one of four or five entities out there that create all of the content for TV and movies. And so it just quite naturally, you are less inclined to risk offending your bosses. And so you're going to see less satire. You're going to see less biting the hand that feeds you. Because people want to work, and especially as somebody who's kind of picked on Disney maybe one time too many, and fallen out of their good graces, I think that there's.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, I think so. I poked them in the eye one time too many, and I don't think I'm welcome back in Burbank anytime soon.
Bugger! I do follow your tweets though. So I do know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, going back to Dinosaurs, I mean, that was the leftiest show that I ever worked on.
Yes, no, I can tell. You know what's funny? A lot of people have asked me, because I started watching it as soon as it came on Disney Plus, but a lot of people have asked me if it still holds up. And really, no, it does, because it's a mirror to society. That doesn't change. That is a society that we're still in today with a lot of these episodes that are the issues in the sexual harassment one, obviously, and the network TV, and
especially in the sitcom world, because there was a huge lawsuit in the 90s. Some writers on Friends were sued.
Oh wow!
And it was a very famous lawsuit, and I know the people involved. And the ruling at that time, a writer's assistant said that this was a hostile work environment, that she felt like the sexual discussions that the writers were having in the writer's room were sort of inappropriate for the workplace. And she felt angry and hurt and sort of ill-used in this environment. And the ruling of the judge at the time was that, talking about sex and making snarky sex jokes in a context of a comedy writer's room is a fairly acceptable part of the process. And, that became the standard by which writers' rooms functioned for most of my career, was that, in the sacred space of the writer's room, people were allowed to free associate and say things that,
the banter
that made, that even if it wasn't directly useful for the show, you would kind of come in and clear your throat every day and say, this happened between my wife and I, or my girlfriend and I, or whatever, my lover, blah, blah, blah. And you could talk about stuff like that. But I stand by it. I mean, if you're trying to write comedy, it feels like you have to be free to, to say things that maybe cross the line while you're working toward finding what you can actually use for a TV show.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I was trying to talk to someone, or not, wasn't trying to. Someone had said something that I laughed at it and said, that's so petty, then laughed at it, then called him the C word, then laughed again and said, oh my God, then laughed again and said, oh my God, that is fucking hilarious. And he turned around and said, I don't want to be petty. And I said, no, but you don't understand. It's funny. So you get the pass for that reason, because you've structured a joke. You've made a very funny. I'm quite hard to make laugh, and this made me laugh pretty hard. And I was sort of just trying to say, don't chill. Just because I said it was petty doesn't mean I said it was a bad petty. Like, it was just, the pettiness of comedy.
Right. Sometimes you have to be cruel in order to be hilarious. The principle has evolved in the last few years, this idea of not punching down, right? That the targets of your rancor should not be people who are disempowered, because for years, there was a tendency to make racist kind of jokes, or jokes about, someone with a disability or whatever, making fun of somebody who, has a speech impediment or something like that in a comedy was fairly fair game, or somebody who like was sexually ambiguous in some way, or, something like that. Those kinds of things, even just a few years ago, those things were very fair game on sitcoms. To have some joke. I mean, I worked on a show called Rules of Engagement, where, one of the standard sort of put downs on the show would be David Spade calling somebody gay.
Yeah.
It was like, the young man on the show who was like desperately in love with his new fiance would talk about her in glowing terms, and Spade would look at him and go, gay,
That's what I do, Tim. And I am gay.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's the kind of thing that would make me cringe now. But that was not that long ago that we did that show. And the context is, yes, he's using gay as a pejorative. The context is what he's saying is there's something that you're not the stalwart Dick Smith that I am. So it's both both a joke, about his own character and the flaws in his own character, and a put down of this other guy. It's interesting because this has happened very quickly. If you think about the comedy movies that I grew up on in the 80s and 90s, all the things, the Animal House and Porky's and things like that. There's a reason that those movies don't exist anymore. I mean, that nobody's making movies about horny high school boys spying on girls in locker rooms, through a little hole in the tile, and getting caught jerking off, whatever. I mean, those are the kind of stories, maybe for good or for bad, but those are the kind of stories that, there was a new movie like that every Friday, in the 80s and 90s when I was coming up. And that's a genre that's just been wiped off the face of the earth. I remember in Animal House, he takes a girl to the wild party at the frat, and she's passed out drunk, on the lawn of her house when he brings her home, and a little devil appears on his shoulder and says, fuck her. And then an angel appears on his other shoulder saying, no, you can't take advantage of her. She's, and it was that was like one of the biggest laughs in the show. Every one of those movies had these horrible, things that would be viewed as horrible now. And again, this is all for the good. Society has evolved and we don't do that kind of humor anymore. But I also noticed that there's no movies. There are very few comedy movies made anymore. It's like at a certain point, when you keep narrowing the gauge of what is socially acceptable in a movie, well, then you basically can't make a movie. It's very hard to make an R-rated comedy anymore. You can, I don't know. There are very few of them anymore.
Yeah, I saw a host on, I can't remember what channel, CNN, something like that, a while ago, was sort of going, if you keep taking all these subjects away from comedians, we're not going to have anything to be funny about. But they're still finding a way. There's some wonderful stand-up going on, without having to call someone a name or...
Yes, and I think, and you have to sort of accept the fact that things evolve and that things move on. But it is... I guess I'm just going to say it's interesting that things have changed so quickly and so radically that there are basically whole genres of comedy entertainment that you just can't go to anymore. And we're looking at different things now. We're looking at different ways to be funny.
Although I'm glad to see that we've moved on from things like the Carry On series. Benny Hill, they can stay back in the 70s, I think.
Yes, very well.
I used to watch Benny Hill with my nana.
Oh, it's terrible. It was really quite bad in terms of where we are now. Chasing around women.
Well, yeah, it was vulgar. It was vulgar burlesque comedy.
Why I'm against it, sorry to just jump in here, is because we don't watch a horror movie, right, like Scream, and go, what these characters are doing is socially acceptable. So I don't know why we're looking at a comedy and judging that by what is in this has to be socially acceptable. That's why things like Benny Hill to me will be funny.
Literally making light of the situation.
Well, yeah, isn't that what we're meant to do, is to make... Look, what was that film, La Vita e Bella? Roberto Benigni won a whole ton of awards because he turned a dark subject
got a lot of death threats too.
Of course he did, because there are assholes in the world, Evan. People will do anything for attention. I'm telling you that. Like, start fucking podcasts. Right, but you know what I mean. Like, we don't. Why are we judging comedy with a different barometer than what we are judging all the other movies? We're not watching a superhero movie and going, well, these villains are killing people. Well, we do know. Let's ban all these. Let's change comic book movies so that they're not killing people anymore. I know that the Avengers, no one dies in those movies.
Sure.
Of the innocent people. That's Disney-fied. Yes, we understand that. So that's why I'm against it. Because I feel like we're singling comedy out.
Look, I think there's a healthy pushback. I mean, there's nothing sadder to me than to write a joke or to tell a story and have someone come to me and say, that offended me, that hurt me. Because, you made a sidelong joke about, Armenian people, or you made a sidelong, sort of slam at obese people or something like that. And I was watching your show and I was enjoying it. And then I suddenly felt very sad and alienated and criticized. And that's not a good feeling. You want everybody to feel included and be in on the joke, but so I think it's a healthy dynamic that people are coming forward and saying, these shows that I watched, they hurt my feelings. They made me feel shitty when I was a kid growing up or whatever. And I think it's good that we're not doing them anymore. But I also think we should sort of acknowledge the history, and say these things are valid and they were valid in context. I mean, you can't, just because Woody Allen is questionable now in terms of his behaviors and his motivations through the years as far as women and young women go, you can't tell me that he didn't write and direct, 10 or 12 of the best comedies of the 20th century.
Hand on my heart, never seen a Woody Allen movie.
Or Monty Python, for example. I mean, there's a lot of kind of stuff about gay people, and there's stuff about if John Cleese came out with a new show and he was in blackface today, I would say, John, you should not do that. No. But I can't tell the BBC, to stop running old Monty Python episodes because they had a teeny ear for something, 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
I wouldn't be surprised if they wouldn't air those episodes anymore.
No, they have. They've pulled some of those episodes.
Yeah.
They've definitely pulled them. But it's kind of like, well, I don't know, take the whole of it, except, and accept it in context. I mean,
see, I like what they've done with Gone with the Wind, where they haven't messed with the film, they haven't taken it down. They just put a disclaimer at the front, sort of going, hey, this is 50 years old.
Right, and accept it in those terms. I mean, you don't want to expurgate history, and you don't want to, sort of dismantle culture. You just want to give it a context. I mean, when they play Gone with the Wind on the Turner Classic Movies channel, which we have here in the United States, I don't know if you have that, whatever. But I mean, yes, they have. Not only do they have a thing at the beginning, but they nowadays they have like a little 5-minute discussion where they talk about the context and the reasons for the storytelling. I mean, Gone with the Wind is a terribly racist movie, and the story is told from the point of view of Margaret Mitchell, who was celebrating the romance of the wonderful, pre-war South, and that beautiful, I mean, there's a prologue at the beginning about this mystical land of princes on horseback and maidens in distress. And, the whole backstory of Gone with the Wind is kind of ugly, but it speaks to the culture in which it was created.
Yeah.
So, all this, I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of ambivalence about this stuff, but totally accept the onward march of sensibilities that they're always going to change. We don't listen to the same music we listened to 50 years ago. Why should we be making the same kinds of movies and TV shows?
You mean the same terrible jokes? Welcome to Thrash and Treasure, Tim.
Or the same musicals being revived.
Yes, well, speaking of which, excellent. That's your second segue. Round of applause.
Very good.
Evan.
What did you think of Guys and Dolls, Evan?
Yes.
Well, this is the thing. Like, you've just rattled off most of my points.
Really?
With something that was, made in the 50s, then revived many times. But
many times.
I listened to the 1992 version where, like, you know, why do you keep making the same thing over and over again? Music has changed. Let's move on. Update it a bit.
Because old people need entertainment too, Evan.
Well, see, I'm of two minds with Guys and Dolls.
Okay.
So you want to honour the show. Like, obviously, a bunch of guys have got together and gone, hey, let's do Guys and Dolls. And they've gone, yeah, great idea. Let's do it exactly how we remember it and do it again.
A museum piece, as they would call it.
Yeah. Now, and again, the cast in this is phenomenal. You're like, I know of everyone in this cast. And I'm just going, oh, they're in it, and they're in it, and J.K. Simmons is in it. I know him, and it just goes on. And you get all these really talented people together, and they could have dated it a bit. Maybe not the singing, but certainly the music. You know, orchestras play differently now, or even in '92. This thing's still 40 years old at that point. A loyalty to the show, to do it again, how it was. I kind of wish they'd updated it, though. So I'm stuck down the middle. Yeah, there's a lot of xylophone. There's a lot of whistles and bells. And
what about a ska version?
No, just a modern take. Just replay it with a modern orchestra. You know, they play differently now. That's why you can hear an orchestra from 40 years ago. And geez, that's an old-sounding orchestra. This reminded me a lot of your early... was it MGM films? You know, because it's 1950s, it's Rat Pack, it's Dean Martin.
It is
sort of era.
Frank Sinatra. Yeah,
there are certainly musicals that are more abstract, more poetic. Where you're not dealing with as kind of complex a plot. Where it's more of a mood piece or something like that. A show like Guys and Dolls is just so old-fashioned in the sense that it's an A story and a B story woven together, themes and protagonists searching for goals that are clearly outlined to the audience. It's a very old-fashioned musical in that respect. But those tend to be the ones that I like the most. I've seen most of the big musicals of of recent years. I saw Hamilton in New York, and it's a wonderful show, and I love the music. But it's a little more abstract. It's not, because it skits over the surface of the man's life over a period of 50 years or something. You're not telling a it doesn't have
story.
Aristotelian unities of time, place, and action that the normal storytelling we do has.
Now you saw this on Broadway, didn't you?
I saw this production, and I think I also saw the later production. There was a production a couple years ago with Oliver Platt and
that's right. Yeah, that was the Michael Grandage production, I think. Or Ewan McGregor had done that in London. Yeah. That particular production.
They revived it like 7-8 years ago. I don't know when it was, but I saw that one too. I pretty much see Guys and Dolls whenever it pops up. I saw a production in LA here at the Music Center years ago with Milton Berle and.
Oh wow!
Whenever a production of Guys and Dolls of any level comes through LA, I usually check it out. And if I'm in New York, I'll see the current revival. And it's one of the shows, one of those sort of evergreen shows that is always being revived. Because it's such a solid musical. And this is a show written in this Runionese dialect. Damon Runyon was a writer. I think he was a sports writer, but also sort of a kind of a humor columnist that wrote for the New York papers in the 1940s, 30s, and 40s, and I guess 50s maybe. He's one of those guys who sort of commented on street life in New York, and he was writing from this kind of New York Jewish perspective, and it's amazing how a show like this sort of translates into. You can do an all black production of it. You could do an all Asian production of it. You can do it in other countries and different things. I'm sure it's been done. I'm sure there's a production somewhere in India right now. If they well, probably not because the theaters are all
no.
But at any given point around the world, I'm sure. Maybe on a day that isn't in the middle of a pandemic. There are generally probably 1,000 productions of Guys and Dolls being done in primary schools and secondary schools and colleges and amateur and professional theater companies. It's a bulletproof show. It's just a show that always works. and I never saw it, and I maybe I should chase down the cast recording, but there was an all-black version of Guys and Dolls that played quite successfully on Broadway in the 70s. I'm going to say like the mid 70s. There was a revival that starred like Robert Guillaume, and but it was in the wake of that surge of black musicals that came out in the 60s and 70s. There was they had like an all-black version of Hello Dolly that happened with Pearl Bailey, and they did an all-black Guys and Dolls. And I think they did change some of the orchestration and some of the and some of the dialogue for that production. I'd be very curious to seek it out to see whether they adapted the music and made it a little more interesting and not such a museum piece as you suggest.
Yeah. I did wish that I had the time to sit down and listen to other versions to see, what if they did. I did see some random clips from, what do you call them, amateur productions and smaller shows. And they, as far as I could tell, they were using the exact same music. With nothing wrong with that, trying to recreate that 50s vibe, but I think it really needs to be updated.
Yeah. Just to throw it back, just before I forget, Robert
Guillaume, who I worked with on the Sports Night program.
Oh wow! He was Rafiki in The Lion King,
the original Rafiki. Yes.
Yeah, who was also, we had Nathan Lane, who was in the 92 version, as well as Ernie Sabella, who were both Timon and Pumbaa. So hopefully Matthew Broderick has done a Guys and Dolls professionally out there. And
I don't know that he has.
No, yeah, that's my Disney knowledge coming into play there. Anyway, sorry.
I was going to say I needed Aaron to help me with, like, the only thing I knew of Guys and Dolls was through popular culture. It's made its way into The Simpsons and to all sorts of different shows.
Guys and Dolls are just a bunch of crazy guys and dolls.
Yeah, see, that's all I knew of it. I was really disappointed that song wasn't in there.
And I didn't even know that for a long time because I didn't know this musical very well for a long time. I've never seen it, so
I think the only breakthrough song was "Luck Be a Lady" Tonight. Yep. So I'm surprised that that's the only one I did know. Yep. So why is it such an iconic,
Sinatra
big name musical when there's only one song that I've heard of?
Well, the original production had another song in it, "I Love You, a Bushel and a Peck," which was a big hit in the 1950s. Again, in the kind of thinking of the time, they didn't want to put it in the movie since it was already a hit. So they replaced it in the movie with the Kitty Cat song, "Pet Me Papa" or something. But "Bushel and a Pet" was a big hit in the in the 50s. But not a lot of hits out of that show. But familiar songs. I mean, standards. But you can't go to Las Vegas without hearing "Luck Be a Lady." I mean, it's in front of the Bellagio when they're doing their fountain show. You hear Frank Sinatra singing "Luck Be a Lady" as the water shoots into the air.
Oh wow!
It's the national anthem of Las Vegas.
Yeah. See, that's the other thing with this. It seems to be about gambling. I couldn't really glean the story just from listening to the album. This is the thing, I've not seen it. I haven't read up what it's about. I was just trying to glean the story from the music. And apparently $1,000 is a lot of money. And, if you wanted to know how much money you needed to sing "I'm in the Money," about $1,000. Mm-hmm. Yeah, was it marry the man today to change them later? It was like, good luck with that one.
A terrible theme.
Yeah. Yeah, other than gambling, I assume someone's lost some money and owes someone else some money and is trying to get married in the middle of it. That's about all I could glean from the story. So why is it so popular?
I mean, my answer is that, musicals are hard. I mean, there are very few truly excellent musicals. Because most of them fall apart in the second act as a story. The stories don't add up to a lot. And musicals tended to be this kind of thing that was thrown together, like a patched up thing that had like a time limit because we have to open next week. And so things get stuffed in and then they become sacred. They become part of the successful musical. And most of them are a mess. I mean, most musicals are as literature are a mess, but the songs, are very often quite beautiful. And so we have a sentimental attachment to some of these shows that have these wonderful songs. And also, of course, it's live theater. So when you go to a musical show, it takes you back to the experience you had at that age, where you were at that time. I mean, my father and mother on one of their early dates went to New York City and saw Oklahoma, when he was just back from the World War II. And so Oklahoma always had this very sentimental place in their life, And I think that that's true for a lot of people. And before, rock music sort of took off in the 60s, the music of Broadway was the popular music of America, so the musicals from the classical era up until like the mid 60s are held in this esteem, because I think that music was just an important part of everyday life. It was on the radio. It was what was on the radio, before the Beatles came along, and changed everything. So yes, I think people are overly sentimental about some of these musicals from the classic era. But the other thing I really will say is that it's a hard form. It's hard to make a great musical. People keep trying to make new musicals, and they don't tend to be very good. They don't tend to capture the imagination. I mean, Evan Hansen and Hamilton were like big breakthroughs in the last few years, and prior to that, the musical form was, not doing great. You had Rent, you had March of the Falsettos, you had, chorus line and stuff. But I mean, the Broadway musical went through a very sallow period for like 30 years. And was also the subject of much derision. I mean, people couldn't get over that hump of like, whoa, they just break into song, the Jets and the Sharks, they're dancing like ballet dancers in the street, that's crazy. What kind of gang does this guy belong to? I mean, that was the staple of stand-up comedy for like 40 years, making fun of how dumb musicals were. So the fact that there's been this popular cultural revival of the musical is kind of a fun thing, because it is a difficult form to do. It's difficult to do well. And the book for Guys and Dolls is dated, but it's pretty good. It's a pretty good book, and the musical on the whole is an enjoyable experience. But yes, like so many things, like the comedies of the 80s and 90s that I was talking about earlier, you have to sort of choke back a little bit of something. The sexism and the woman desperate to get married, and the guy trying to get out of it and doesn't want to get married because he doesn't want to get he doesn't want to get tied down because I mean that old school kind of misogyny that's rampant throughout this particular.
All of a sudden, we're watching an episode of Honeymooners.
Or it's more reminiscent of like Mad Men. The sort of the sexism of that time, the idea of women as as an accessory for a good time and not a viable life partner. So if that kind of stuff, if you've got a tolerance for a little bit of that kind of stuff, it's a fun show. It's a bouncy show with a lot of laughs in it. And I think a lot of the people are sentimental about it because it was widely produced in high schools and in colleges too throughout the United States. So the theater geeks who run everything in New York theater, they're Nathan Lane's, I mean, he's named Nathan literally because, he grew up loving Guys and Dolls and he wanted to play Nathan Detroit.
Funny you say that because for those who have seen your sitcom, The Kids Are All Right, in the pilot episode, the Tim character who is based off yourself does Man of La Mancha, but I believe that the real musical that you did was actually Guys and Dolls.
Yes.
So that functions sort of as that your big break, if you will, in community theater. And
my first big musical role as a kid was to play Nathan Detroit in Guys and Dolls, and I got my laughs. And it really sort of gave me the proverbial hard-on for that kind of performing and that kind of storytelling. So it was just an amazing experience, and I was a big ham like the kid is on the show. Mm-hmm. Always eager to get in front of the crowd, always eager for a bit of the spotlight, battling for attention because I am, as in the story, I'm one of 8 brothers, and a ridiculous Irish Catholic family. And so, but that's an accurate sense of how I was when I was that age. I was a kid who wanted to differentiate himself desperately from his very conservative family and very crowded family, and I got very excited about things like musical theater, which was the accessible version of show business that I had access to, even though I grew up in basically 10 minutes from Hollywood and Burbank. I grew up in Glendale, which basically is sandwiched right between Burbank and Hollywood, which is where all of television and movies are based, or but all of American stuff is ostensibly based. So it's funny being very close to show business, growing up around professional show business. Those fences around the studios are just as high for me as they are for somebody in Iowa or in Perth, Australia. It's you drive by on the freeway and you look over the fence at Disney and you see some of the stuff going on, but you have no idea as a kid how to get in there and actually start mucking around. It's another reason that the shows are so revived is it's really funny when you have 8th graders wearing gangster outfits, walking around talking D's and O's and smoking cigars and talking about dames and look, come on, let's go play our craps game and stuff. I mean, it's very amusing to see that. It's kind of that Bugsy Malone sort of thing. And so schools do the show relentlessly. But there are like 20 shows, mostly of the Rodgers and Hammerstein ones, and a couple of Cole Porter ones, a couple of George Gershwin ones, that are like the standard classic musicals from the 1940s and 50s that America seems to have a very sentimental attachment to. And then there's all these ancillary shows that aren't as good that didn't quite make the grade. And when there's a reason that the movies keep doing IP, doing intellectual property. There's a reason that every new movie that is a sequel. That all the TV shows. I mean, I was approached about writing a new version of Lassie.
Don't CG the dog. Don't you dare CG that dog.
I'm sorry, what?
Do not CG that dog.
No, believe me. I came in with a very nihilistic attitude about Lassie, and there was no enthusiasm for my take on it. But I'm saying is, as a television writer, IP, intellectual property, is king right now. That's why Disney is doing remakes of all their cartoons as live action, and all their live action is cartoons, and they're doing prequels and sequels to every single thing. Every ride at Disneyland is going to now be also a movie. All of these companies are so terrified of sticking their neck out and risking money on a new idea, an original idea. They're going to do a revival. I read that they're going to do a movie of Guys and Dolls. They're going to shoot a new movie of Guys and Dolls.
Okay, let's go full circle.
And Steven Spielberg just shot his redo of West Side Story. The movie of West Side Story is beautiful. It's really well done. Why on earth would you have to remake West Side Story and Steven Spielberg, no less? Why do that? Because they're chicken shit. They know that if they do a new musical called Mary's Got a Hat, there's not going to be any interest in it because nobody knows that. But a certain number of people will automatically go see a new production of West Side Story. So if they're going to risk $150 million, they might as well go with something that's a known quantity. Yeah. And that's the whole nature of this business.
I really want to see Mary's Got a Hat.
Yeah, with Chris Evans.
Yeah, we have Chris Evans in it. But Mary Tester sings I Am Wearing a Hat in trousers. Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Bugsy Malone because that was my first musical in 1997, if we can say that day.
Oh, that's great. You were in Bugsy Malone.
Yes. So we were dressed up as gangsters, and it was hilarious.
And it's fun and funny.
It was.
Yeah, and that's why you do Oklahoma where everybody dresses like cowboys.
Yeah, never did. I did The King and I, a mostly white production of King and I.
Yes, I was in a white production of King and I too.
Oh.
So to answer my question of why is Guys and Dolls so great, so revered, and so break,
all of those reasons.
Because everyone's done it.
Everyone's done
all
it. All
creative theatre kids.
I haven't.
Did it in high school.
Done to death. And the world is a chicken shit place. Show business is a world of cover your ass. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but watch American TV. Every new show is a version of an old show.
Yep, I watch RuPaul's Drag Race. I watch RuPaul's Drag Race All Stars. I watch RuPaul's Drag Race España, RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under, Canada's Drag Race UK, Drag Race Holland, and very soon Drag Race Philippines. So you are absolutely right, Tim.
But at least 10 years ago or 15 years ago, whenever Ru started, that was at least an original idea that somebody rolled the dice with. Again, we're every new show that's shooting now is a revival of something or a piece of material that was tried and tested somewhere else. I mean, a lot of the pilots and things that we do for new shows here are I mean, I keep getting presented with something. Oh, this is a hit show in Israel. This is a hit show in South Africa. You know, we redo versions of, you know, English shows all the time. You know, and I don't know, Australian shows. I'm trying to think of Australian shows that have made that have been flipped into American versions. But the UK, I mean, UK intellectual property, we reuse all the time. You know, and it's just basically people being chicken shit, because they can point to it and they say, look, this was successful somewhere, someone liked this. And more importantly, they have 100 episodes of this already written. So, you know, if you're, you know, so don't worry about being creative, because there's some episodes you can steal, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, if Hollywood wants an original IP, an original story, I have 3 novels that are a trilogy that they're more than happy to give me a call, and to Jeff Bezos.
Listen, if those novels gained any kind of infamy out in the world, Hollywood would come knocking on your door. You know, but they want something. You know, they want something that has already had a life and a success somewhere else.
Yeah, I know. I just have to get people to buy them, Tim. Now, a fun fact for people at home, sitcom fans, and I know it's a friend of yours, James Burrows. His father is Abe Burrows, who wrote Guys and Dolls. James Burrows is another sitcom legend who has directed maybe 1,000, 2,000 episodes.
Yeah, he was the premier pilot director for 15 years in television, doing mostly those multicam shows. He did the pilot for Friends, and I think, you know, for Frasier, and, you know, and Cheers, and and every hot pilot every year. You know, James Burrows had his, for, you know, through the 90s and the aughts, James Burrows basically had his pick of the pilots. With the waning of the multicam form, I don't see James working as much. But he's also an older guy now. He's 15, 20 years older than me. So he's in his freaking dotage, I bet. But I'm assuming he's over at Nate Now's in Beverly Hills, and I can stop in and say hi to him at any time. There's, you know, there are certain breakfast places in LA where people like that go.
You know where all the cool kids hide.
Yeah, but well, when I'm in LA, Tim, you can show me where all the cool kids hang out.
But yeah, Abe Burrows wrote that, and he wrote Frank Lesser's other big musical, How to Succeed. How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. Burrows wrote that. And I think James Burrows started out as like a stage manager working for his dad on some of these Broadway shows, you know, and then transitioned to, you know, television and working in LA.
Doesn't matter where you start.
Yeah, what are the chances that a guy whose father was very successful in show business also had a successful show business career? What are the odds against that? As somebody who bumps up against that every day, the odds are very good that if you're that your family's in the business, that you're going to have a bit of a leg up. You know, my father taught anthropology.
But yeah, look, to be honest, I don't have the affection for Guys and Dolls that everyone has. I've watched one YouTube production. It was a high school production that the director had them all standing at the front of the stage at downstage center. And that's it. All dialogue was done there. And then they would walk around and do their little motions and stuff, right? And they were mic'd up, right? But they would then come together and stand there. And even if they were at a table, they would get up from that table and move to the center of the stage right before the apron.
Maybe that's the only place they had good lights, you know? It might have just been a lighting.
I was about to say, maybe the spotlight's broken.
I don't know.
They didn't have a follow spot, so they had to basically find their way into the light, you know, to sing their song.
Yep.
The director did not have a clue, that's what, because these kids had some talent. They really did.
Well, that's good. But I mean, no, I got hooked into Guys and Dolls at a very early age. I'd never heard of it before the school decided they were going to do it. And then, you know, because I was a big ham and a showboat at school, I ended up getting the big part in it. And I just went to town. So it's more of a sentimental experience for me. But it's not a deep story. It's not a deep story that really resonates emotionally. It really is about let's have fun.
Yeah.
And I think also on some level, it's a compendium. The kind of comedy in it is a compendium of the comic attitudes of that era that again was centered around the Jewish comedy of New York. You know, all those writers, all those comedy writers that they were the superstars of American comedy for 50 years. They all came out of a 1 mile radius of the East River in Manhattan. I mean, all the Woody Allens and Mel Brookses and, Larry Gelbart and all these great comedy writers that I sort of grew up, Carl Reiner, that I grew up sort of emulating and being very interested in. They all kind of came out of this culture from the 50s and 60s in New York. And, so I, for whatever reason, I've always felt very akin to that. And, I'm not Jewish, I'm Irish Catholic, but I've always loved those rhythms, the rhythms of the comedy that these folks did at that time. So, and Guys and Dolls just fits right into that. I mean, Nathan Detroit is a Borscht Belt comic. He's a baggy pants comedian who's doing this, and he's doing jokes about his ball busting girlfriend. I mean, that's what he's playing. He's got this girlfriend who's hanging on him, and he's commitment shy, and there's no good reason for him to be commitment shy, but for whatever reason he is, and he can't bring himself to make an honest woman of Miss Adelaide, and he's an absurd comic character. Nathan Lane did him great. Apparently there was a production in 1959 in New York where Walter Matthau played the role. It's just that kind of iconic guy. It's a part of American culture that I'm very sentimental about, but I completely agree with you that there's not a lot of artistic merit to the storytelling here. But it's very competent, very straightforward the way it's done, but it's not incompetent. Everything resolves in a fairly reasonable way, and it's really well done. But it's but it doesn't leave you with a lot to think about, afterwards. I mean, you see something like Cabaret or Fiddler or Hamilton or whatever, and there's a lot of thoughtfulness in those shows. There's a lot of how we think about ourselves in the world, and there's there aren't a lot of heavy themes in Guys and Dolls. It's just for fun. Look, the much maligned movie with Marlon Brando and
Frank
Sinatra, isn't that bad. It's pretty good. I feel like Frank Sinatra is miscast. On Broadway, the original guy was Sam Levine, who is this very funny, Jewish actor, performer who, he had that wonderful rhythm. He was the only guy, for whatever reason, in Hollywood that was allowed to be a Jew. I mean, back in those days. And he turns up in old, like, the Thin Man movies. And I saw him in a movie called Crossfire the other night, where he was about anti-Semitism, where he was a Jew that got beaten to death for being Jewish. But he's this wonderful, kind of warm, lovable little guy. And he was the original star of Guys and Dolls. And Robert Alda, Alan Alda's father, was the original Sky Masterson.
Oh, wow.
There was something that really worked in the stage production, and then when they translated the movie, there were definitely some screw ups. And I think number one is Frank Sinatra is badly cast. He doesn't get the laughs out of Nathan Detroit that you say a Nathan Lane or a Tim Doyle would have gotten in the role. But
could imagine.
It's worth a look. It might give you a better sense of why people like it so much, because it's very fun and bouncy. It's a bouncy show. The stakes of the story, it's just a love story. It's like, will these people make it work? And a guy makes a bet that he can take a girl away overnight to Havana. Basically he's betting that it's like one of those comedies from the 80s where a guy's making a bet with his friend whether he can fuck somebody before prom.
The universal story.
It's a universal story, but this was the 1950s version, is that Frank Sinatra bets, Marlon Brando bets Frank Sinatra that he can take Gene Simmons to Havana for an overnight trip.
Now that's the female Gene Simmons with a J.
Yeah, not
the Kiss lead singer for all the heavy metal fans out there. I know you got excited at hearing that name.
No, that, by the way, would be a way to revise the show. Would be to have somebody take Gene Simmons to Havana overnight from Kiss. That would be a very different, and fall in love with Gene Simmons. That would be an extremely different path for the story to take. For Marlon Brando to fall in love with the lead singer from Kiss.
in our Michael Cerveris interview, I asked him if what musical could be done in a country and western style, and just off the top of my head, I said this, and his reaction was, "Yeah, that could work." So, do you think it could work in sort of a bluegrass style, or set it in the Wild West, change the humor a little bit?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, the music would be adaptable, I think. I mean, again, these are pretty songs. Your eyes are the eyes of a woman in love, and oh, how they, I mean, these are pretty songs.
Yeah.
There's a great song in there that Sky Masterson sings that's not in the movie. My time of day is the dark time, a couple of deals before dawn, when the street belongs to the cop and the janitor with a mop. I mean, it's this whole little ode to what it feels like late at night when you're, walking down a city street, and the smell of the rain-washed pavement comes up clean and fresh and cold, and the street lamp light fills the gutter with gold. It's beautiful. I mean, anybody who's ever come home drunk from a bar and walked down the street has had that feeling, that wonderful feeling, that 3 a.m. feeling. There's a lot in the show, and that could be successfully mined. And of course, they made the movie and they cut that song out because Hollywood is like stupid, reflexively stupid.
Yeah, I've complained about that a fair bit.
And they always cut out the word song. They did Into the Woods, that movie of Into the Woods. There's that wonderful song that the baker has that he sings with his father. No more questions, no more quests. It's the best song in the show. And I wouldn't have even minded James Corden singing it. And they cut it out. I don't get it. And it's not, and I read an interview. They didn't even shoot it. It's not like it got cut out for time. No. The director's like, pass.
Yeah.
I'm still complaining about Hello Dolly cutting Penny in My Pocket.
Yeah, it's a great song. It's
one of the best songs in the whole thing, and it's not in the show. It's ridiculous.
Never gonna hear end of this one.
No, instead Gene Kelly, who directed it, had to turn every musical number into a 20-minute, spectacular. It's just like he went that thing got so bloated and overblown. It was in the aftermath of Oliver, everybody decided that that musical films had to be 3.5 hours long, and so they started making these ridiculously overly inflated versions of these Broadway musicals. And Hello Dolly was the apex of that. They cut out a bunch of songs in order to turn every musical number into literally a stadium full of people singing and dancing in full vigor for 15 or 20 minutes. And, and the story at every juncture, every time a song starts, the story stops, comes to a grinding halt.
Yes.
And you literally, you want to get up and go make a sandwich and then come back and let the thing go on. People grow up with these musicals and love them. And so they don't have the same profit impulse or like craven impulses that the Hollywood people do when they take a musical. I mean, Evan Hansen it was a wonderful show on Broadway. I think the movie has a stink to it that it hasn't come out yet, but the movie already has kind of a, I can smell burning tires. Something is a little off.
Can you smell the nepotism? Can you?
Well, yes. I mean, but that kid was good on Broadway. I mean, the difference is you can have a 30-year-old guy playing a high school student on Broadway, but not in a movie. But you put him in a musical. I mean, a movie is going to be a little tricky. And my friend Caitlin Deaver is in that. She's the actress. She was on the Tim Allen show that I ran for 3 years, and she's a wonderful actress and very talented singer. So I'm looking forward to seeing what she does with it. But Ben is a little long in tooth to play the high school student in that show, and also it's a weird show. I mean, it worked as a piece of theater. I think it's going to be problematic as a movie because he's a lying sack of shit through the whole thing. And I mean, the whole thing is this guy misrepresenting himself in order to get with a girl. So we're back to that. and which is not which again would have been an acceptable theme in the 1950s or the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a feeling the audiences are going to go, "What the fuck?" when they see this thing in their local cinemas.
Just on the story, though, I was quite disappointed that the dolls didn't come to life and kill the guys. I was waiting for that the whole time. It needed more Chucky. Now, just to connect musicals and sitcoms, so far we've had the Friends parody musical and Gilligan's Island parody musical and a Very Brady musical and Happy Days the musical, and soon we got The Nanny. So which sitcom do you pray never, ever gets the musical treatment?
Well, there's so many bad music. I mean, there's so many bad sitcoms. And I would hate to, the truth is I hate to shit on any of them because every bad sitcom I'm familiar with, one of my friends worked on. So I'm probably reluctant to go and point at something and say, that one's a piece of shit. You know,
you are on the torture chamber.
Yeah, so. It would be that would be very painful. But I would also think that a lot of comedy shows wouldn't lend themselves necessarily to be musicals because by nature musicals have a heightened energy. They have the rationale in a musical for the singing is that the person's excitement has gotten to a level where mere words won't even express it anymore. They have to burst with song, and when you have a low-key musical a low-key comedy show like Frasier or something, or where people are kind of sitting around making jokes about wine and opera, and some of those people would be very skilled. I think they love to sing. The stars of that show would love to sing, but I'm not sure it would be right. There's something very nice and low key about certain comedies that I don't think would lend themselves to being musicalized.
Sondheim could do a Frasier musical.
Yeah, well, he could do anything. He could do no wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess he's officially retired now. I guess he's officially retired now. I don't think he's working on anything anymore.
No, he's 91.
I know. It makes me sad though, because he had a remarkable career and was a great force in musical theater and in terms of making musical theater more sophisticated, more adult.
G'day listeners, Aaron here. While you're topping up your coffees, did you know that you can support our show and go on a fantastically scary adventure at the same time? Go to www.thetonistantales.com/bookstore to grab your copy of The Toniston Tales, a darkly funny Aussie trilogy about a young boy who rescues injured animals in his spare time and the roller coaster ride he's taken on by a literal fish out of water. Written by me, the village idiot of Thrash and Treasure, you'll come to love Toniston Turnbull and the dozens of wacky characters that he meets along the way. And here is a sneak peek. Crack, thud, the human trips over the uneven ground as the Twanimal blows out the lantern. Watch your step, Cubpaw says a little too late. Why did you put the light out? Bollycosh, an open flame near hay bales? And here I thought you were smart, sir. Toniston agrees with how silly he must have sounded. What are we doing out here? The boy asks as they blindly walk around the side of the house, where they're greeted by giant shadows rising up above them. Unable to properly see in the pitch-black darkness, Toniston presumes they are the 3 hay bales. He looks around. The plains are vast, and the spotlights out in the distance, now a purple colour, seem to be too far away to bring any real light to them. They do, however, look very pretty dancing on the rippling oceanic sky. Stand back, the silhouetted Cubpaw warns with his gruff but friendly voice, clearly able to see in the darkness better than the human, who had constantly refused to eat his carrots. Grab your copy of The Toniston Tales from thetonistonTales.com/bookstore today. Hooroo! But speaking of sitcoms, you've worked in both styles, sort of single cam and multicam. Do you have a preference for what you prefer to work with, or either producing or writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I prefer single cam at this point. The truth is, there's nothing harder than doing a multicam. I mean, they're very, very hard to do well. They're easy to do badly, but they're hard to do well because you have the stylistic burden of being very funny, and your jokes are hanging out there in front of a live audience. Despite all of the, there's a lot of kind of joshing around about sitcoms, about how much we sweeten the laugh tracks and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the truth is, on the shows I've worked on, that's just never been the case. Usually what you end up doing is the multicam shows, the live audience shows. Usually you have to actually edit down the laughs because the live audience knows it's there to contribute and they overdo it. So something that's a very mild smile at home might get, an 8-second laugh break on a sitcom. And in the editing room, you're like, chop that out, just get rid of it, because you have to try to move the story along. And it's very unnatural. I mean, the difference between a multicam and a single cam is the difference between a play and a movie. I mean, a multicam is like a little play, and it has all the artificiality of that. When you step outside the house, and they're in their backyard and they're they're having a barbecue or something, you can see the painted backdrop and the fake trees behind them. It looks like a play, whereas in a single cam show, you treat it like a movie. There's a lot more of those genre elements. You actually go outdoors to shoot outdoor scenes generally, and that kind of thing. So, and single camera shows are more kinetic. There's a little more freedom, but I guess more importantly, there are also more of the style now. I mean, when I started in the 90s, multicams were, the big shows were Seinfeld and Frasier and, and all these shows were, and, Friends and whatever, they were multicams. Those were the hot shows. Those were the shows that won Emmy Awards every year. And then somewhere in the mid 90s or the late 90s, that stopped and people started looking down their nose at multicams. So as a creative person, I certainly don't want to put my energy into shows that either aren't going to get scheduled because they're multicams or that the audience is going to look at with disdain because they've somehow been educated to think the multicams are stupid, that they're sort of brain dead. But when you do them really well, it's there's nothing better.
Well, do you say, Stu, I think it is an overabundance, but just on the audience overdoing it, and your reputation as being sitcom Viagra, does that mean that every episode is a standing ovation?
I've worked on some shows. I've worked on some shows that I didn't think were great, but the audience really, it adds an energy to the thing, and they really do come to appreciate it. So, a lot of the time they're just so super excited because they're in the same room with their TV friends. So, like the last multicam I did was a show with Tim Allen. I ran his show for 3 years, a show he did called Last Man Standing. And people were so thrilled just to be in the presence of Tim Allen that he could barely walk in and crack a line, and they would fall down shitting themselves. They'd be laughing so hard. And it is a temptation to be lazy because, when there's a temptation to not work hard if the people can get the easy laughs, they can get the cheap laughs. So, you have to keep yourself honest. But I do like about the fact is there's no more educational moment than when a joke you think is going to play in front of the audience falls flat. There's so much to look at there. And you don't get that kind of thing when you're shooting a single camera show. You can tell yourself that all the funny ideas you have in your single camera script are brilliant, and it'll never really be tested because you'll never have to hear the audience not laugh at them.
Now, obviously, I mentioned Dinosaurs, which I will forever praise. And I know it's obviously been a topic about this final episode. That wasn't the final episode, obviously, because then they played the 4 or 5 episodes afterwards as a quote unquote coda. However, I will forever keep that final episode where basically all the characters are going to die. We know what happens to the dinosaurs. It's like watching the Titanic and being surprised at the end of it. Like, where the hell have you been for the past 100 years?
I think people were surprised that we went there.
Yeah. Oh, look, what? I remember it. It's always stood out as a kid. And I don't know why, but I guess, and I was always excited by it. I don't know why. Not because they were going to die, but because you guys went there. You guys weren't spoon feeding me as a child. And I even noticed that the baby, the annoying one, wasn't in a lot of the later seasons because you guys, I could tell, even now watching it as an adult, I can tell you guys probably didn't like the response that the public had and the studio had to put the baby in everything. That sort of shows because he's been sidelined. Thank you for that, by the way. So in terms of my question, obviously you guys went, as I've heard, you went down to the set. What was that like the first time when you walk into this beautiful physical location that they've made? Like this was, still today I marvel at the design behind it all. What was that like? You know, it is your first job.
It was my first, professional showbiz writing job, and so I didn't have anything to compare it to. It spoiled me for everything else because production was so lavish on that show.
Yeah,
and I had also the privilege of sort of being there from the beginning. I mean, Michael Jacobs and Bob Young had written the pilot, and the show, because it was so expensive, it went straight to series. They had an order for 12 episodes, so he hired his writing staff. So we were all there. The writers were all there while the sets were being put up. So, on my way to the car every night, I would kind of cruise by and watch them building this thing. First, they put up this platform on stage 10 at Radford Studios. They built to put the whole thing 4 feet up off the ground for the puppeteers. And then they started assembling this framework that was the house, and they sprayed it with this foam stuff that made it look like rock. And I mean, we watched it progress over a period of time. And we were in the meetings. I mean, Michael Jacobs, who ran that show, he had the writers basically sitting on 2 couches in his office, and we watched the whole thing sort of come together. Kirk Thatcher was involved as a writer and a designer on the show. So, we would sit there and they would bring in drawings of what the characters were going to look like and drawings of what the sets were going to look like and the props and we would discuss and we'd say, no, this should be funnier if it was more like this, or maybe it should be this. And, even as a baby writer on that show, I was permitted to some extent to have opinions. So it was, it was a great big show to be involved in as my first project in television. I'm so much happier that I did that instead of working on Full House or something, which would have been a much more conventional kind of sitcom experience. So it was an insanely expensive show to produce, had all this technology, and I met some amazingly talented writers. And the funny part is, after 30 years, 3 or 4 of those writers are still among my best friends. I mean, Kirk Thatcher, Rob Yulin, Victor Fresco, these are people that I socialized with. And, I've worked with all, and they were writers that I met on the Dinosaurs show. So, and I still see fairly regularly. So, it was a fundamental experience.
Were those suits problematic? Because obviously they were computerized or mechanical.
Yeah, they were mechanical, and like anything mechanical, I mean, they had problems, and the poor people, the guys who were in those suits. I mean, Bill Beretta, who was inside the Earl costume. I mean, that poor guy. He carried, because you have to picture they have this suit on, and then they have this 40-pound computer resting on top of their head with this automated face that opened, the eyes moved and the mouth moved, and a puppeteer off screen was operating it, making the lip flaps and the facial expressions and stuff. And the guy inside is walking around waving his arms and having to move across. And then of course, if you look at almost every one of my episodes, I wrote a musical number. So you talk about music theater. I'm pretty sure Earl sings "I Feel Pretty" or "I Enjoy Being a Girl." I'm pretty sure at one time. Some various musical songs, and I would always have them singing and dancing. And even on episodes that didn't have my actual name on it as a writer, I would be the one who would come in and pitch, I think they should sing and dance here. and
does not surprise me.
And these wonderful actors, these wonderful suit actors, they killed themselves to give us what we asked for. It was hell inside those suits. He had to pound carbohydrates like an athlete, just wait on, keep his strength up for a 12-hour day of shooting in that costume. And I watched the kid who played Robbie, the young man who was in the Robbie costume. I saw him throw up inside his costume.
Oh God!
At one time, and the guy inside got sick, and he vomited inside his costume. And I had to take off the head and get him out of it and clean the whole thing out. And I think he created job security that day.
Did that end up on the Christmas reel?
What was funny about it is you just heard him. And then and you basically saw him kind of going, oh, and meanwhile the face was still operating, and then they had took it off, and then there was a mess. Not quite sure how much of it ended up actually getting shot, but Leif Tilden was inside that suit. Also one of the Ninja Turtles. I mean, two of our regular people were also Ninja Turtles because it was the same Henson technology. It was the same people. This was just the next level of that. The origin of the Dinosaur Show was Henson had created this technology and he didn't have anything to do with it. And Disney was trying to buy the Henson company, and he pitched that idea of, can we do dinosaurs using these kind of suits? And then he, while they were negotiating all of that and the purchase of the company, he died. And in the chaotic aftermath of his death, this show became born with all these other people saying what Jim would have wanted, And ultimately we ended up with something that was pretty good, but it was kind of a crazy time. Now, again, I never met Jim. I was brought in a year after his disappearance, but I was there for all 3 years of the Dinosaur Show. I stuck it out to the end. My friends Rob and Victor both moved on to other jobs, but I decided to stick it out because I loved the job so much, and I also figured I'd never work again.
Okay, we'll speak maybe after the French episode, because I would like to know what happened in that episode. Are we meant to be learning a message about a moral lesson about racism or something? And in the end of it, we didn't learn anything, and the Frenchman was killed off or was eaten or something like that. I couldn't stop laughing because I thought, no, that's not meant. This is not how TV is meant to go. So what was going through your mind? Seriously, what's wrong with your lot?
I don't remember that one very clearly. That one, I believe, was written by Dave Kaplan and Brian LePan. And I'm sure I was there for the rewrite. But what you do as a writer on these shows is they send you off to write a draft. And then on most shows, in those days anyway, then you had sort of a producer's responsibility, and you would be tracking that show through production. So I would be on stage for the episodes that had my name on it, and I would be away from the writer's room when some other thing was conceived. So I can't tell you a lot about the French bird episode, other than the exchange student episode, other than I remember a million Jerry Lewis jokes and and some of that. But yes, the bird gets eaten by somebody at the end or whatever.
Yeah, the baby.
Oh, the baby eats the bird. Sure.
Baby eats the bird, and I'm thinking, like, where's the moral lesson? Well, that one episode would not go down well today. But
what was great about the show, and compared to almost the rest, again, this did not bear out in the rest of my television career, is that because it was thought of as a children's show, the people at the network were kind of hands off. They didn't, after the first handful of episodes, we didn't get a lot of notes and a lot of interference. They weren't paying that much attention to what we were doing. And so, we did whatever we wanted. And as you suggest, we got fed up with the baby and having to service the baby and having the baby be the center of everything. So we would do a certain amount of that, but more and more we did episodes that were basically just a big political satire, and make the sort of statements that we wanted to make about American politics at the time. And when people talk about that final episode, but I mean, we wanted to make the statement, that industry was destroying the planet. We wanted to say that on the show, and we said it a half dozen different ways in other episodes. But it was important to us in 1992 or 3 or whatever it was to alert people to the dangers of climate change. And, and thank God we had the impact we did, and we turned everything around. That problem got linked, but you talk about the timeliness of the show, and that's because, the problems that we were pointing to on that show, the things we were satirizing, they're still here. They haven't gone away.
Yeah. No, just on the baby, I think what the problem is not its presence or its voice, it's the catchphrases.
Not the mama.
Yeah, right. That's it. Because if I noticed, especially in the first maybe season and a half, the baby's responses were absolute smart ass, but really, really funny. Mm-hmm. Like there was some real clever lines that came out of the baby's mouth, and that sort of faded away. as you guys put the baby in the background a bit more, and had less of a focus on him. Because whenever you mention the show to people, and they're going to mention baby Sinclair, and they're going to say not the mama or gotta love me. But I have to say to everyone that baby is a hell of a lot more in that first season, especially, or the first maybe 20 episodes, I think. There's just little lines here and there. The delivery I thought was quite clever and cutting, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I can completely picture that we probably got lazy with the baby because we were so sort of disinterested in it. I mean, you're not going to be able to use. I was very focused on doing the sort of social and political satire stuff. So, and that was the stuff that got me excited. So I did an episode called Green Card, which was about immigration and about sort of the racism of the two-legged dinosaurs versus the four-legged dinosaurs. And they're building a wall, to keep the four-legged dinosaurs on their side of the swamp and all this stuff. I mean, that was much more interesting to me. And the baby didn't have a role in that. You could have the baby go, whoa, bad or something, but you couldn't. He could not be part of the intelligent discussion of these kinds of issues. So I was probably pretty disinterested in servicing the baby. But then I also wrote there was an episode called The Terrible Twos, which was just a straight out parody of The Exorcist, which was all about the baby being awful and spitting up green stuff and his head spinning around and they have to call out an exorcist, because he turned 2 and babies are notoriously difficult during their second year. So, I was willing to go there once in a while, have some fun with the baby. But the stuff that really excited me the most was when we were, punching hard at the politics of the time. When we took on the Gulf War, we had a 2-part Gulf War episode where they were, fighting with the four-legged dinosaurs over their pistachio nuts, and that kind of stuff. So we were friends, Rob Bulin went to Harvard and was friends with all the Simpsons writers. He had come up through the Harvard Lampoon with some of these guys. And so we had a feeling of competitiveness with the guys who were doing the Simpsons at the time. And we were envious of the freedom they had to tackle adult topics and through their family stories. So that was the orientation that some of the writers on the staff were really focused on.
Now you bring up the writers' room. Would you say that writers' room process can only really be accepted in the realm of television, especially sitcoms, maybe even drama, as opposed to film or theater or something which, when you hear written by committee, it seems to be a bad thing. You hear a song, it was written by committee. A movie, it was written by committee. Would you agree that perhaps in sitcoms or in television that really seems to be the only place that written by committee is accepted?
Well, look, it's a peculiarity of the American television system because, in network television, which basically barely exists anymore. I mean, the network television business that I came up in is on life support at this point. The traditional networks. But what made those shows, made that distinct, and I think distinct from just about anywhere else in the world, is a season would be 22 or 24 episodes. You had to, during the course of 10 months, you had to produce, or 9.5 months, produce 22 or 24, sometimes 26 episodes of a successful show. And so in order to be that productive, you need a lot of ideas bouncing off the walls. You just need a lot of people throwing in ideas. You've got to have, it becomes a factory where you are at all times, servicing the show that's shooting on the stage. You're planning the one that's going to shoot the week after that. You're working on an outline for the one that's going to shoot after that. You're pitching the idea to the network for the one that's going to shoot after that. And you're doing post-production on the 2 that shot last week and the week before, and then it's sounding. So you've got like 8 or 10 episodes at a time, in the flow of assembly. And the writer's room, the big writer's room, is very helpful in that process. But, if you're doing 6 or 8 episodes for Netflix or something, you don't need the big writer's room for that. But what I do think is it's also much more useful in comedy than it is in drama, I mean, because, I have limited flavors of comedy in me that I come up with in a writer's room. I have some tricks up my sleeve. I have some places that I go based on my life and my background. But what's great is to be in a room with other complementary writers, people who fill in your voids, who have wonderful ideas. So every show that I've run, and most of the comedy shows that I've worked on, you find yourself in a room and you come to a thing where that's not that funny, and somebody else says something 10 times funnier, and you say, cut out my thing, put that thing in. That's the thing that needs to go here. And that's where the collaboration becomes so valuable when you're trying hard to be funny. If you're doing Grey's Anatomy or something, and all you really have to figure out, I mean, which again, I don't mean to denigrate, drama shows, but they don't have that, they don't have that added level of difficulty, which is having to tell a story and be funny at the same time. All they have, and those shows tend to be much more formulaic. Those kind of genre cop shows, lawyer shows, doctor shows. You know that the little girl with cancer is going to have cancer, and that's going to be sad and tug at your heartstrings. You know that the two doctors who are sleeping together are going to get caught, and his girlfriend or his wife or whatever. I mean, all that bullshit soap opera stuff. Those shows live and die for. In a comedy show, every plot moment has to be framed as something inherently comic, or should be framed as something inherently comic, and then the dialogue has to have comedy in it. And so for that, the collaboration is really useful. Especially again, if you have a big order where you have to do, where you have to do a bunch of them. We did 23 episodes of The Kids Were All Right, and it almost killed me, just to get those out, because I was working 20 hours a day on that show. But it would, the only way I was able to maintain the level of quality on it was that I had a great writing staff, and they brought, when my brain was fried, they brought me good ideas.
That's it. Surround yourself with like-minded people that complement your talent, even if they don't have the same voice. Like that's
better. That's better. And a lot of the time, I'll be working with a writer, and somebody will say, "Oh, I hate that guy. I can't stand that guy," or this woman I couldn't stand. She was terrible, or whatever. And a lot of the time, it's sort of like, well, I don't maybe like them that much as a person, but they bring an energy to the show that I would never have. Yeah. And and I don't mind somebody who is going to disagree with me and argue with me a little bit, because they're going to force me to be, to defend my ideas and to make them better. Yeah. So,
yeah. That's a very good lesson for people out there. That
I'm a creature of the writer's room. I mean, I've spent the bulk of my adult life, in those rooms. And the fact that I haven't been working in a writer's room over the last year, drives me crazy.
That's right. Neither have I, Tim. Neither have I. But I've spent my whole adult life dreaming of getting into a writer's room one day.
Well, what do you do in Australia? How is Australian television produced?
Well, we don't really have sitcoms. It's all fucking reality TV. And every now and then there'll be a quirky Aussie comedy drama that'll be an hour long, primetime drama. But our industry is pretty much the same as America. It's all on cable or on streaming. All the prestige stuff is all cable.
I'm trying to think of us. I mean, obviously the Australian talent, the actors are over in the United States. They're here all over the place. We just,
it's because there's nothing here.
Yeah, well, they immediately, they get a little bit of notoriety and then they head to LA. But I mean, I haven't seen a lot of Australian shows that have emigrated. There's that guy who dresses up like a girl and like Sunnyvale High, or what was it?
Summer Heights High. Chris Lilly.
That guy. But he's kind of in trouble now, isn't he? I mean, because he also does like blackface and stuff. I look back now at some of those shows that he did, and I'm kind of going, Yeah. I mean, that private school girl one was just great.
Jamae.
Yeah, Jamae. That was great. But then he did a couple of ones where he literally, like, I don't know, played like Boys from Samoa or someplace.
Jonah from Tonga. Yeah,
Tonga. That's right, the kid from Tonga. And it's like, what the hell?
And it was popular at the time. It was massively popular with a lot of Maoris and Islanders. So,
but that's the only thing that I've seen from Australia in the sitcom form. I remember there was a show about a girl in Tasmania or something, I think, that I watched once. People sometimes send me foreign formats. They send me foreign formats to say, can you adapt this for American television and stuff? But I haven't seen a lot from Australia. Yeah, a lot of time I get something like from South Africa or Israel or whatever, but not so much from Australia. You don't feel that you have a vibrant television writing culture there.
Not anymore.
It just seems strange.
Yeah.
Doesn't Coca-Cola want to sell ads on television?
No, we haven't had a studio sitcom in years, I don't think. Not a multicam live studio audience.
Well, it seems very strange.
The last one was 2000, I think.
But you buy our stuff.
Yeah, which, funnily enough, that show, the last one we had was Sit Down, Shut Up, got bought by Fox, and they turned it into an animated series. And neither series lasted. The Australian one didn't last, and the American one didn't last. So what was the point?
Yeah, well, believe me, there's more and more of that. And that's what network television here is going to become. It's going to become sports and reality, ultimately. I think that the golden days of doing 24 episodes of a new show are probably going away, because the economics are such that, they don't want to do it. And a place like Netflix, because they're, they don't need 100 episodes of your show, they just want to make a big splash the first season or two in order to draw in subscribers. And so, my friend Victor did a show for Netflix called the Santa Clarita Diet, about where Drew Barrymore played a zombie, and they did like 2 seasons, 3 seasons of it, and then they pulled the plug, and it wasn't sort of that they didn't like it and it wasn't doing well. It was like they got enough. They got the bang out of it that they wanted, which was, they want to be able to announce, every week that they've got some new show that might trick somebody into signing up for Netflix. So it's different. For 30 years, we were working on shows trying to get to 100 episodes so that we could then get the reruns that they would show, the syndication money. And you needed enough to sort of run the show 5 days a week, at 10 in the morning in order to make that work. But that model is disappearing.
Well, obviously, one that you worked on in the second season made it to 5,000 episodes, I believe. Whoa. The Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang, yeah. They did a couple of.
Well, I've never seen it. Sorry.
It's all right. Big Bang wasn't my favorite experience, but it was a very well liked show. And you want to talk about a show where the audience really came to play. The fans of that show, because it was a show about sort of nerds, PhD, or actually postdoc guys working at like a Caltech type school, and they were very immersed in sort of nerd culture in terms of comic books and superheroes and that kind of stuff. At the same time, they were also, scientists and completely backward as far as women goes. So the nerds would come to those tapings, and they would piss themselves laughing over the smallest things. And I would get impatient with the show sometimes because I felt like we were being lazy. Just the act of there was sort of a pandering. Yeah, well, it was all framed around the central character of Sheldon, who is a kind of an Asperger's type. I don't think it was ever said explicitly, but that was the idea. He was a guy with very limited emotional range and ability to understand things, but he was a genius when it came to science. So, the premise of the show was always setting up Sheldon in an awkward situation where he could be overly analytical, like Mr. Spock, and make everything brutally difficult for his other friends. And and just week after week, it was just sort of that. And yes, you want to talk about a show that didn't have a lot of substance, or point. That show, it really was just for goofs. Yes, but again, the kids from Caltech would come out in a bus to see it, and they would make and there were lots of inside jokes. He would have a dry erase board in his office in the middle of their living room, and there'd be a different formula on it every week. And the Caltech kids would love that because they'd be all very excited about the scientific formula on the board. So it was nerd comedy, but a massively successful show.
Yeah. Now, okay, I want to just bring up The Kids Are All Right, because I only got 2 more questions. So there was a scene in one of the episodes in the first 10 or so where the mum character is ironing aluminium foil. Now, this reminds me of my dad, who I once caught washing out drinking straws in the sink because he thought he might save some money. Now, was this something your parents did?
Yes, my mother definitely did that.
Oh, we had the same parents.
Yeah, no. She saved the what we call aluminum foil. She saved the aluminum foil, and she also would reuse the little plastic baggies, the sandwich baggies we used for our school lunches. She would rinse those out and reuse those.
Should use it for a pot, would she?
No, not for a pot. She would give she'd give it to you for your sandwich the next day. You know, there were 10 of us in our family, and the sense always was that we were on the verge of being sent out into the street to live in the trees. At any given moment, it could happen. So there was a lot of penny pinching going on in that household.
Obviously, it's a semi-autobiographical. So what sort of ratio are we looking at here? And what sort of things from your real life did you draw out?
Look, almost all of the specifics of the show are real. You know, I mean, all the specific moments and specific references and things that happened, they happened in some way. They just didn't quite happen in the way that they're done in the show. They've been sort of reorganized. And they didn't necessarily happen with the people that they happened with in the show.
Yeah.
You know, I have 7 brothers, but my brothers, you know, I juggled around some of their personality elements a little bit because they didn't, you know, sign up to be television characters, and I wanted to spare them some of that. So I changed their names and fiddled with that a bit. But almost everything you could point to in an episode was based on something real that happened in my life or somebody close to me.
Last point I'm up to, the youngest brother was rolling around in dog shit because Frank wants to get paid. Now, obviously, writers, I know what it's like being a writer myself. You're always thinking of ideas. Looking back on your illustrious career, what has been, what you would say now, looking back in retrospect, your worst pilot or sitcom idea that you've had so far, that you would look at and go, oh my God, Tim, what were you thinking?
Oh, well, something that originated with me, not a job that I worked on where it was somebody.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
I've written some pretty weak sitcoms over the years. I worked on a script. I had a script that I was trying to write for Sally Field years ago, maybe 15, maybe 20 years ago. Sally Field wanted to do a sitcom, and we had a meeting, and I had this story about a woman whose husband dies, and she's left sort of penniless, and she has to sort of restart her life and blah, blah, blah. And I wrote this thing and wrote it around in circles 100 different ways. And it never got funny, and it never got particularly interesting. And at a certain point, Sally basically just, like, I think I saved the note. She wrote me a note saying, Tim, just walk away. Let's just not do this. You know, she had to basically tell me that she was losing interest, that there wasn't anything here, that we started off with a lot of bright promise, but that the show just, it wasn't. I mean, I've been involved in things that were like colossal belly flops. I wrote a pilot about called The Oog Show, about a family of cave people, you know, many, many years. And this was a wonderful belly flop. You know, I wrote it for Fox, and Joe Flaherty played the father, the caveman, and his grandpa was played by an orangutan. We literally had an orangutan who came in, and a trained orangutan that was grandpa that lived with them. And there was a lot of big swings in that show. It was very silly. And it actually had a lot of merit, but, you know, nobody ever lost their job at a network for not picking up the caveman show. You know, that's the kind of thing that's the kind of decision that nobody ever has to explain to their bosses. So when you write your silly caveman show with half naked Joe Flaherty wearing a skin, standing barefoot on a soundstage with a fake cave, there's a very decent chance that the show with the fancy people wearing a tuxedo and going for a night on the town, you know, that one gets picked up over the dumb caveman show, no matter what the merits are of the script. So I've done a lot of things that are probably embarrassing, but the sad sort of dying with a whimper rather than a bang of my Sally Field project was probably the weakest thing that I wrote that anyone ever actually looked at. I wrote a show called The Abraham Lincoln Show.
Oh, okay.
You know, which was a sitcom set in the Lincoln White House during the Civil War, and and people kept comparing it to Heil Honey, I'm Home, but my Lincoln Show actually came this close about a dozen times to getting produced, and never really happened, because again, things like that always feel too much like just a sketch. They don't really feel like they have the legs to be a series.
Look, that's a lot of sitcoms, I think.
No, when you're only going to do 6 or 7 of them anyway, you might as well do something that's just funny and is a sketch that isn't going to, that you don't have to rely on to have big emotional weight to it, I mean, I like that kind of thing. I wrote on the Roseanne show, which was very much like a fucking Arthur Miller play half the time. We would go, 3 minutes without a laugh sometimes on that show.
That was another one I grew up with. I've come to the end of my questions.
Well, it's nice to meet you. Get the word out about Kids Are All Right. I'm glad to hear it's playing in Australia, and I would love to see. I'd love to see those viewing numbers come way up in Australia, because there's always a chance they'll ask me to do another dozen.
Yeah, I reckon reboot that. Don't reboot Dinosaurs.
Yeah,
sorry.
I'd love to. Well, they're talking about rebooting Dinosaurs.
I know, in CGI, and I don't want it.
Yeah,
sorry, Tim. I want it in puppetry. Yes, in those suits. Yes. How we had it, yes. I don't need a modernization in CGI, because it won't be that show that you guys created back then that is incredibly special. There is a reason why there's still articles about it, and why so many people were excited when it came on Disney Plus. It was a lot rarer. It was never shown on repeats, but it made such an impact on us all. It really did.
Great. I'd love to. I would accept it in any form. I would just love to see all these things live on as long as they can, in any form they can.
Well, I will fight you on that. I will debate you till the cows come home to just please leave it as it'll be.
I would be very interested to see how well the CG could simulate the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't want them. I mean, they can do pretty remarkable stuff now. I mean, the point is they would have to make it as cumbersome as it was. They would have to make it look as shitty as it did. And if they made it look more elegant, if they were suddenly able to turn cartwheels, well then no, that would be wrong. But anyway, I'm just kidding. True. But I'm always open to a new adventure.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure meeting you, and great talking to you again. And if there's anything else you need, we can do this again sometime. I'm always very interested in pontificating.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Very good. Bye-bye, guys.
Alrighty, that was an episode, and holy moly, was that ever an awesome episode. A mountain of thanks to Tim Doyle for being Tim Doyle and joining us not once but twice. And a fun fact, in the first recording that we had, Tim and I actually realized that we have been credited together on a project in the past, and then when I had a look at that project, it turns out we're actually only a few names away from each other in those credits. So that was pretty cool. So to think this all started with a pun. The story of my life. Anyways, be sure to follow him on Twitter at Flaked and Formed. That's Flaked, as in Flaked, and Formed, Formed. Just check out Twitter, all the links below. And also be sure to check out Dinosaurs and The Kids Are All Right on your local Disney Overlord streaming service. Please be sure to like and subscribe us, buy and read the Doniston Tales. I've been Aaron, that was Evan. We're going to leave you with the next single from friend of the show, the beautiful Lisa Humber, with her latest single, With You. Anyways, you take care, and we shall see you next time. Hooroo!
I drink till I can sleep, the parts I never show. I sleep till I can drink, my heart it breaks so slow. With you, without you, I can't breathe.